Very exciting. I don't feel any compunction to wait any longer, though we may have one or two more people trickle in. But it's my pleasure to introduce to you Meggan Manlove. Meggan has served as a pastor in our synod and then recently elected bishop of the synod. That's a ministry of word and sacrament within our church. Of course, you can read about bishops in the Bible and throughout history. They've been leaders in our church for a very long time. Meggan is not new at ministry, but new in her role, and we are so excited to have her today preaching here today and spending some time with us here in the forum. So it's my pleasure to introduce Meggan Manlove, Bishop of Northwest Intermountain.
Good job.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Pastor Lori, for inviting me, and she was one of the first to say, whenever you want to come. So here I am. Those of you who were at Synod Assembly know that I like a script. So I'm going to use my script, and then we'll do some Q&A. So that's kind of my plan. We were asked during the election to lift up a scripture passage that is guiding us. This seems to be a day to talk about youth gatherings. This was the theme verse for one of a different youth gathering that I went to. But these are verses that have been guiding me. Galatians 5. This isn't my favorite translation, but it's still pretty good. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. For me, the gift of our Lutheran tradition, one of the deep gifts is this, that we are both freed from something and freed for. And that both and I'm reading a book right now that Bishop Patricia Lowell has from the St. Paul Synod has encouraged all of the bishops to read in preparation for my first conference of bishops at the end of this month, and it's by a Methodist. And I was telling Lori last night, it's pretty good, but then I'm I'm a Lutheran. there's some things about this that I don't need all three different kinds of grace. I just want grace.
Yeah.
Wesley was reading Luther when his heart was strangely warm. So we're very closely connected. But And partly because I have served the last 12 and a half years in Nampa, Idaho, home of Northwest Nazarene University, and I've learned a lot about the Wesleyans and holiness and sanctification, which I never thought about in my life. And I think that everybody talks about grace, but we really get it. And my favorite, I love lifelong Lutherans, but I also love people who come to our congregations from other traditions and are wow, I've never heard this grace preached in a sermon or explained in a Bible study. So that freedom, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We're enjoying what you're saying.
Okay. But that we are also freed for, and I know that this congregation understands that deeply. So we are all the Synod, but today greetings from the Synod office of the Northwest Intermountain Synod. I want to take a few minutes to lift up and celebrate a few things we do together as a synod that would be much harder to do on our own. Our synod has supported 3 campus ministries since before our inception as a synod. Mark will correct me on any of this. Eastern Washington and Cheney, where my internship was, Wazoo in Pullman, and University of Idaho in Moscow. You might know, I hope you know, that the Eastern Lutheran Campus Ministry Board has just taken a leap of faith and called a new campus pastor who will split her time between the main campus in Cheney and the University District here in Spokane.
Great.
She will be with us in November.
Yeah, she told me that. I was at their board meeting, and so that's wonderful. Yeah, and she's great. I am so excited about these possibilities. Deacon Carla Newman Smiley has served the Moscow campus for over 20 years and more recently picked up the Pullman campus as well. Carla's presence on the Moscow campus last fall was vital in the aftermath of 4 students being murdered. It should surprise none of us that the one campus minister asked to pray at the campus-wide prayer vigil was Carla.
Yeah.
Deacon Carla has been showing up for students, faculty, and staff on that campus for over 20 years, and you have been supporting her through your mission support dollars. So I know you have young adults in this congregation, and that's wonderful, but what a gift it is for your bishop to be able to go to congregations all over this synod and say, you may not have young adults, but you are supporting 3 young adult ministries plus outdoor ministries in this synod. That's powerful. As you know, our relationship with the Ilanga-Kilombaro Diocese dates back to the EL's formation, 1988. The church still needs to reckon with our history of colonialism, to be sure. But at least for the last 35 years, we have been living into more of an accompaniment model, sending people back and forth, recognizing that we have as much or more to learn from our companions in the UKD than we have to give or to teach. So it's a model, I think, much more aligned with the Jesus we encounter in the Gospels. I'm honored to be traveling there this fall with Pastor Ethan and Carla Bergman and Deacon Heidi and Dan Cryer on your behalf. Our synod helps facilitate something the church calls faithful innovation. So if you don't get to be part of a Lilly-funded program like you all did, this is a great program. It's a process to help us develop deeper connections with God, each other, and our neighbors. A learning community made up of different congregational teams from across our synod uses spiritual practices of listening, discernment, and trying small experiments to help us discover what God is up to and how we can partner with God in our communities. Finally, the synod facilitates candidacy of pastors and deacons as well as the first call process. This includes a candidacy committee for the synod and many call committees. We currently have 7 candidates pursuing ministry of word and sacrament and 1 candidate working towards word and service. I think this is pretty impressive. I'm going to take the time to read it. The following individuals have received calls in our synod since July 1, 2022. Tim Statham at Shepherd of the Mountains, Jackson, Wyoming, a transition pastor. Ann Bjorklund at New Day in Idaho Falls. Tyler Gupsh, Zion, Spokane Valley. Nathaniel and Tricia Chrisman, Emmanuel Ritzville, St. John Sprague. Lucas Scherson, Faith Caldwell. I was just talking to some former Caldwell people. There they are. Yep, that was fun. Ethan Bergman, Grace Episcopal in Ellensburg. Dane Breslin at Sunny Slope UCC and their Brethren in Wenatchee. Christopher Peterson is a Presbyterian USA pastor serving Christ in Yakima. Abigail D'Ambrosia just got installed, thank you, at Fullness of God, Holden Village. Pat Cayley at Troy Lutheran, Troy, Idaho. Eva Jensen, Faith in Leavenworth. Ann Murphy, Central Yakima. Kathleen Anderson is a transition pastor at First in Pasco. Sierra Westerman at Emmanuel Moscow. And Andy Hamlin, who's a team candidate at Our Savior in Twin Falls, Idaho. Mariah Mills at Redeemer Boise, Grace Horseshoe Bend, and Emily Kunker is the new campus minister at Cheney and Spokane. So that's not nothing.
That's really impressive.
It was really fun. I had Kathy Steiner give me that list before I went to Wenatchee and Leavenworth the first weekend that I was bishop, and Phil Meisner was like, man, that was kind of fun to read. And I was like, well, you've been working really hard.
Yeah.
So Phil does a lot of that. Luther Heights Bible Camp just took a leap and hired an associate camp director to help congregations with faith formation, part of making this finally a year-round ministry. And Luther Haven recently opened yet one more site, McPherson Meadows. I would count outdoor ministries as vital partners for us. I also want to lift up several things that our church-wide partner is doing. First, in April, Presiding Bishop Elizabeth Eaton announced the launch of the ELCA's Truth and Healing Movement. The focus of the initiative is to increase the church's understanding of the impacts of colonization on Indigenous people in past generations and the present. Quote, we must be in better, right, and healthy relationships with the Indigenous people of Turtle Island, said Eaton. Turtle Island is kind of the common name for North America among all the Indigenous people. Quote, as we know, the truth and our knowing and embracing it is the first step toward healing for all of us. The ELCA website is not the most easy thing to navigate, but the Truth and Healing website is amazing. It's a beautiful website. It's so fun. There is on there, they have kind of produced, I don't know all the language because I'm not a videographer, but in the 90s, they made a documentary about the Lutheran involvement in the AIM movement, the American Indian movement. And now you can just watch it on YouTube. Like, I watched it with my mom, who worked for the ALC and was like, oh, there's Joe Bash, there's Price, there's all these people. And so, like, what I love about that documentary is that this is not new for Lutherans to be involved in this work. It's a part of our history. That's really fun. They've curated, you seem to be a group of readers. There's a whole Indigenous reads, so you can look, and they have curated all these books. I mean, and Louise Erdrich is not the only one. There's lots of them. So you might enjoy that. Anyway, and then Vance Blackfox, the Cherokee who's at our Indigenous desk, he has been doing a lot of webinars online. This month, he's doing a lot about in boarding schools, and he's doing interviews with survivors and descendants of survivors of boarding schools. So anyway, next summer, our ELCA youth will head to New Orleans for the triennial ELCA youth gathering, and we will have our first simultaneous young adult gathering. So that's exciting. I've been talking about this all summer. Lutheran Disaster Response shares God's hope, healing, and renewal with people whose lives have been disrupted by disasters in the United States and around the world. When the dust settles and the headlines change, the Lutherans stay to provide ongoing assistance to those in need. And boy, was it humbling and just so beautiful after the Medical Lake fire I got to be on a Zoom call with the head of LDR, and she's like, let's make this happen. And so, there's money coming to help that community. And we know that after Red Cross leaves, that's when we will start to, have resources. So, and if you haven't met them, Greg and Carol Yeager are the pastors serving Medical Lake in Reardon, and they're just the perfect couple to be out there. They're just great. So I want to say thank you if you serve on Synod Council, a Synod Committee, the board of one of our 3 outdoor ministries or campus ministries, your own church council, Lutheran Community Services, or the board of a local nonprofit. They are our partners. We don't have to do all of this alone. And so you have a lot of great partners in the Spokane area. We know that congregations and individuals in our synod are doing amazing ministry. I know a lot of stories that need to be told and celebrate, and I'm going to keep hearing those stories, but I can't write them all myself, nor should I. So I guess one ask is, if you like to write, or you know somebody who'd like to write for the Synod e-News, let me know, or come and introduce yourself to me. It's been amazing as I've just been doing this a few months. I think I've collected 5 people from around the synod who are like, I would love to write something up about something in our cluster. So, I also want to say, I am not here because of your mission support. I am also not ignorant about your mission support. So thank you, St. Mark's, for continuing to step up. We can't do what we do as a synod if you don't. Money isn't everything. It shouldn't be a god, but it does get stuff done. And so thank you. Thank you for being leaders in mission support. And thank you for caring for Pastor Lori. I saw lots of people asking her on the way out. And we don't know. We don't know what the future is going to be, but you are not alone in this. The Synod staff, myself included, will be with you on this journey and care for you and help you care for one another through whatever is bringing in. Of course, the Holy Spirit will be with us too. So I just want to make sure. And if you have questions about, I guess lots of people have said, where are you going to live? So I've told most people that I'm going to decide in January, because this fall is just nuts with the schedule, and I can't imagine packing up a house right now. And I have to go home and replace my HVAC system anyway. But I think that, I've lived in the Treasure Valley, and I'm single, I don't have kids. My dad died in December 2020. My 82-year-old mom is spending a month with me. Well, she's in my house for a month while I'm gone. And she, I've been there for 12 and a half years. My first call was in rural Iowa, and because I was in a town of 200 in Iowa, when I came to the Treasure Valley, I became very intentional about building a support system outside of my church. And I did that very well. And most of my friends are not Lutheran, which I find very helpful. Because I don't have I don't have power over them, like, they'll call me on crap, you know, they're just like, they see me as Meggan, and that's a lot to give up. And it's a very easy flight, like, it's very nice to get on the plane at 9 a.m., land at 9 a.m. And so I don't know that I don't know. And I don't think I'll move for a year, especially if you don't know, I'm able to stay at Martin and Susan's house while they're gone, so that's quite a gift. So I'm supposedly helping them, but really they're helping. So that's really wonderful, and yeah, so anyway, that's one thing that people have asked me about. When I started, people were asking about the staff, but I think I've made that pretty clear that the staff will be, at least for the foreseeable future, Kathy Steiner, who of course is just such a gift to the Synod and to the Synod staff, Phil Meisner, Lee Larson Andrews, who has been serving at Salem for about 13 years, had her last Sunday, and she'll start as our new DEM October 1st. She's also leading the team that's planning my installation, and then she'll come back here and get on a plane and go get trained in Chicago. And she will, it's been great. Mary did an amazing job at that job, and Lee will do it her way, so I'm excited. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear you lost your dad. Is your mom in pretty good health?
She is.
She's staying at your place.
Yes. Just, are we like recording or?
We are recording.
Oh, it's not live though.
It's not, it's
Okay.
on YouTube, it will be loaded on YouTube later.
Not that there's anything about my mom, but yeah, she's in really good health, actually. Yep,
Okay.
she was 14 years younger than my dad, and she traveled all over South Dakota and Minnesota this summer.
Good,
So
okay. It's, you know, it's
yeah, no,
in terms of our own parents, what they're like.
absolutely. And before I got elected, I called the Grand Canyon Synod and was like, there's this call in Phoenix that might be pretty interesting. To be close to my mom. So anyway. Yeah, but this is working out really well,
Good.
and I think after I get through the crazy fall, you know, I can go and spend a couple weeks with her in Arizona in December. So. Yeah.
You've come a long way, but how old were you when you realized you wanted to go into ministry?
Oh, my call story. That's like it was late. So yeah, no. Somebody they asked me about that too. Let's see. So. You gotta, for me, I mean, I don't want to just be my parents' daughter, but it is a big part of kind of, you know, who I am as a church person. So my parents met working for the American Lutheran Church. My mom did media and worked in the youth division, and my dad was the director of outdoor ministry. He came from the YMCA, and really the church realized that it was buying all these properties, and it needed to professionalize them and have things like insurance and boards of directors. And, so my dad was an operations guy, and so anyway, so they met working for the ALC, and so I grew up, even though my dad did not grow up Lutheran at all, he kind of came to it as a young adult, like many of the stories I was talking about, like people who really get that grace, and was mentored by Al Rognus, and he... Anyway, so I just grew up in this very Lutheran home, and then I went to Concordia, which is like the most Lutheran place ever, and Christicon. And I really thought I need to do something non-Lutheran. So I wanted to be in the Peace Corps, but I have epilepsy, and I was having too many seizures to do that. And then, so I went in the Jesuit Volunteer Corps and served in Syracuse, New York for a year working with refugee kids. So in my family, now we call that the gap year. You didn't just go to college, you went to grad school. So I had been in history and English major, which I loved at Concordia, and I thought, I'll study religion, that'd be good. And so I applied to a bunch of divinity schools thinking I would, maybe be a professor or something like that. And my college ethics professor, who did some of my letters and was a University of Chicago grad, said you really need to apply to the MDiv programs, not the Masters of Arts program, because then you could go either way, be a public minister and so okay, extra year. And I don't think I got into the candidacy process until a year in to seminary. And I just thought, well, they're supposed to help me with discernment, so let's see if they help with that. And it just felt good. Like I liked parish ministry, and my mom made a comment that one time, actually at a Christicon, and she thought she was paying me this high compliment, and I took it as an insult. She said, "You are a generalist." And I thought she thought I didn't have any direction in my life. But she and my dad are both generalists. And what she meant was, you like to learn, you can do lots of different things, all that stuff. And really that ended up being such a gift for parish ministry. When I got ordained, I thought, oh, I'll do this. This will make me very marketable for outdoor ministry or campus ministry. And then we were really following the strict rule that you had to be in a parish, and I thought, well, every other specialized ministry has to relate to parishes, so I should do that. And then, when I got the assignment to Western Iowa, I cried for a long time. But I had a lot of friends, or classmates at least, who were like restricting themselves, and I thought, well, I'll get some experience. And then the bishop's assistant said, there's this great group of colleagues in Sioux City, Iowa, and they will mentor you. And they really saw it as their job there were 3 of us who were first call, first career pastors. And this group of mostly guys really saw it as their job to nurture us. Like, that was part of their call to the larger church. So I feel very lucky that I was part of that kind of group. But to be very honest, I also had a conversation in the midst of all of my discernment with one of the guy my dad had mentored. This was the summer I was working at Sky Ranch in Colorado, and I said, this was a camp director who was also happened to be ordained as a pastor. And I said, is it wrong to make a decision about a career based on health insurance? Because my meds were they were not generic at the beginning. And I remember seeing the statement and going, if I had to pay out of pocket, I would not drive. I wouldn't have my driver's license, which is really important in this country. And so I knew, because of my dad, I would have pretty good health insurance with Portico. And so, it's not the most spiritual story. But I kept paying attention to the Holy Spirit and and I also, I very firmly believe that, it's a call, but it's also a job. And you all have calls and jobs.
You just happen to be the bishop.
Now, I never would have thought of that either. And so the story about my dad, he really thought about ordaining ministry and then decided no, he really was committed to being a layman. And when he wasn't a camp director, he was lifting up. He had a national newsletter called Discipleship in Society. It was how the lay people live out their faith in their daily lives, which is so much part of your vocational thing that you've done here. And the comments I got from his friends when I got elected were, oh, is Jerry, cheering, or is he rolling his eyes from, whatever. And I don't know. But I think the church is also very different than it was 20 years ago.
That's right.
So, which my mom has reminded me of. And I think the Conference of Bishops has changed a lot. And, yeah.
So what do you see as the most significant challenges facing this synod?
Yeah, well, it's interesting coming from Idaho. It shapes me, and I've been in Faith Action Network conversations, with people from the West Side now, I know what to call it, and I'm like, wow, you live in a different world than I do in Southern Idaho. I think, yes, we have to get, we don't have as many people in seminary and all of that kind of stuff, but I really think if we're not clear about what the gospel is, and that it's not Christian nationalism, and it's not the purity culture, and it's not the church is my country club, none of the rest of it is going to matter. We got to get clear about what is the life-giving gospel, and what does it mean to follow Jesus. And it's, I really do think that's, I'm convinced that if we all, and I don't just mean all ELC Lutherans in our synod, I mean the whole Pacific Northwest, if we really understood what the gospel said, we wouldn't be so confused about some of these things. So I think good preaching and good Bible study and all of that is really important. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is like equipping lay people. So in a lot of our congregations, not this one, but lots of others, rural congregations, where there's like, you know, this core that just is the alternative voice in their community. Like they're not all the non-denominational churches or very conservative. I've learned that the LDS, the Mormons, are a big tent. Can't put them all in the same. But like in Southeast Idaho, they have a lot of power. And so I think it's important to hang on to some of our little Lutheran congregations and work ecumenically with our Presbyterian, Methodist, UCC, Episcopal friends so that there is an alternative voice. And the Catholic Church, frankly, has changed a lot too. It's a big tent, but the ecumenical partnerships are not quite as robust as they were 20 years ago. So that too. So then, how do we equip the lay people those churches aren't gonna be able to call full-time pastors. So, but there are eager people like all of you in those pews who want their church to continue to proclaim the gospel in that community. So how do we pair them with mentor pastors? How do we use all of the online learning that's available to us? I mean, every day I feel like I learn about some other synod that's doing something online that we can go to. They're happy to welcome us. We just got to curate it all. So yeah, those are a couple things. And then in the midst of everything, like to remember, and I think Bishop Eaton has done a good job about this, but I think to keep remembering that, and this is related to what I said first, but it's a little different, like that we're not a nonprofit, we are the church, and that's different also. So, you know, it's interesting, my church in Nampa, and near Boise, did a lot about affordable housing, and we had a big community garden, and that was that made us unique enough in our community, and plus a woman pastor, and but not everybody could always articulate why the church was involved in those ministries. You know, they couldn't connect the scripture, the gospel, to what we were doing. They knew it was the right thing to do, but like, and I would be like, well, what's different than agnostics for social justice? Like, why are we different? And I think we need to be able to explain that. And then just like, wow, whatever we can do in our communities to just, there aren't very many places anymore that are so intergenerational and have the potential to be socioeconomically diverse, like a congregation. I mean, maybe the grocery store or the gym. But to really claim that gift that we are to our world. I mean, if we can't disagree well in congregations and talk about hard things, I don't have a lot of hope for the rest of, I mean, there's other people that are working on those kind of civic dialogue and all that kind of stuff, but I think we have kind of these unique communities. So, yeah. There's a lot. Yeah, what else? What are people curious about? Or you can ask the same question in a different way.
What is the culture like for pastors who step into new calls and are finding themselves dealing with some of the politics and the confusion people are feeling around politics and personal identity in Christ and
I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking about Lucas, you know, at Faith in Caldwell, this new pastor serving down in Canyon County, which is like the reddest county next to the bluest county. Mm-hmm. Now, he's just in his first year, but what I really appreciate about him is he's just doing all the things, like he's building the relationships. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that every pastor knows to do that. It's not just the right thing to do in the process. He's building social capital. Mm-hmm. I mean, he really, mm-hmm. He's just building the trust by loving them, and it's none of it is like, it's totally genuine. He just he really cares about them and getting to know that community. And then, you know, but then I saw him at Boise Pride too. So he was going somewhere to get, you know, fed like, you know, with some other, like, you know, people. I think, yeah, I don't think that there is one way to do that. I do worry, I mean, I'm grateful, the other thing I'm grateful watching him and a couple of our other younger, or just newer pastors, Pat Cayley would be one whose second career, God, this guy in Troy is just great. He's a former, former cop and felt the call to ministry down in Goldendale. And he came up to me when I was at the picnic in the Palouse Dominican cluster, like there in Pullman, Moscow, and said, you know, this indigenous, like I saw what our systems did to indigenous people and I want to be part of this. That's powerful. I mean, wow. And he's a second career, so he has a different lens, but he, again, is just building the relationships, getting to know the community, and then, you know, preaching the gospel. And then, you know, not every congregation can do all the things. So I think it's good to kind of, I think it's okay. One of my friends who's now in Minnesota says that, and this is like goes with the Lilly grant that you guys were a part of, like that congregations can be vocational. Some congregations just pick, you know, this is the thing. These are the couple things that we're gonna really focus on. And Barbara Rossing, our New Testament professor out in Leavenworth, who's at the Lutheran World Federation in Poland right now, talks about, she's a Revelation scholar, and she talks about like how our congregations can be pockets of, you know, hope, or like, this is where I get a glimpse of the reign of God, and then I'm able to go into community.
Sure.
So I don't have a cookie cutter answer for that question, but it is certainly. And I think the other thing is Lucas is pretty connected to the cluster, so he's not out there on his own. And I think I'm an introvert, but I always needed connection when I was, and even now, like as a parent, like I just think we worry about people when they get isolated.
It seems to me that as we see some of these small congregations diminishing, and we're certainly seeing that in Spokane, where they're selling their buildings or joining ministries or looking ahead. It's encouraging to me when you mention that some of these little churches are being co-denominational,
Oh, yeah.
Presbyterian. And so I'm wondering, as we look forward to strengthen those bonds,
Yes.
so that as
Yes.
Christians following Jesus and the gospel being preached, they may not come at it with all the depth of a Lutheran theology, but we have that to infiltrate into the community and into our lives more. We join with friends and colleagues with whom we share these things, and not make fences, you know, but
Yes.
make bridges to
Yep.
move ahead in this really chaotic time when everybody's struggling to
Yeah.
keep things going. So the more we join, the more we have conversations, the more we identify projects or mission work, that it makes a huge difference. And
I used to get tired when I was in Iowa, and you know, we would always talk about, like somebody at Synod Assembly would always say, oh, the ELCA is in more full communion partnerships than anybody else, and I was just like, big deal. And you know, being in the West, it is a big deal. It's really helpful that all of that groundwork has been laid, and somebody has done the social, like the agreements and all the things. And Phil and I work with adjudicatory leaders. Now, nobody consulted each other 20 years ago about the maps. So, like, I relate to 2 Episcopal bishops, 2 UCC ministers, 4 different presbyters. I mean, it's kind of a lot. But everybody I meet is like, oh, you know, we're so glad. And frankly, I think that, well, I had a really fun conversation with Bishop Jim Gonya, who's the bishop of Rocky Mountain Synod, who has even bigger territory than I do, but he, and more congregations, but he said, oh yeah, in the Conference of Bishops, they always get tired when we say the church is different in the West. He said, but it is. And so, and I think it's even different as I talk to the other Region 1 bishops, like I think it's even different in the Mountain West, which is why I wanted to talk to Jim than it is on the West Coast. And so, I think that I would not be surprised if in the next 6 years, like I start getting calls from some of my colleagues in the Midwest as things continue to change there. How do you do this? Like, we're going to be the experts in the ecumenical. I want to share one. So when I was, one of the churches that's kind of they don't know for sure. I think they actually could grow a little bit because of where they are. We have one church in Oregon, Ontario,
Yeah.
Oregon,
Oregon.
and
Ontario.
yeah, Ontario, and I was there in July, and you know, Paul was saying, yeah, like, how do I start, you know, like, kind of, we might, you know, I don't know how viable we're gonna be. I was like, well, just, maybe you could just worship together once a quarter or something. And so, the Episcopalians, Presbyterians, and Lutherans are now doing that in Ontario. You know, we don't know what the fruit will be now, but they're just doing the relational work, and we'll see where the Spirit leads them. Yeah.
I guess my question has to do with, this all seems to be, our light is in a bushel, you know, it's not getting out. The conversation about Christianity in secular, the United States, is all from the religious right.
Yeah.
And here, you're talking about groups of Christians gathering, working on real issues, but working on community building and community caretaking and repairing wrongs from the past. And so I guess my challenge question to all of us and to you, because you're a little higher on the mountain, you can see, is how do we tell our story to the secular
Preach.
world so that you know, it's not the unchurched or the Christian right, but all this
Yes.
camaraderie and collaboration is amplified, so that okay.
Yeah.
I'm
no,
just here going, yes, okay.
Well, no, this was so I didn't, like,
Megan, can I just add an add-on question?
Yeah.
So what do those other churches offer that we don't?
oh,
Why is the directional flow all that way and not here?
Oh.
That's not my question.
okay, well, let me answer this question
Yeah,
first.
I think they're kind of,
And then I'll come back, yeah. So, I just want to say that, yes, I very much resonate. And when I decided to work on a doctorate of ministry degree, like, the title of it is Equipping Lutherans to Tell Their Faith Story. Because I just think, at least in Southern Idaho, like, I don't know, I'm still learning, you know, the difference, because it is so interesting. Spokane to Eastern Idaho versus Boise to Southern Idaho. That's like polar opposites of the roles that those urban areas play. But, like, with the Mormons and the non-denominational people, like, my members just, they didn't want to tell their faith story like the people coming and knocking on their door, but they didn't know that there was an alternative way to do it. And I think it really is, like, knowing the scriptures deeply and linking those biblical stories to the stories of our lives. And I'm this is so discouraging because it's not like the right has this, you know, loud microphone that they're so skilled at
They do though.
using.
They do.
So but ours is gonna, unfortunately, I think it's gonna be like a million little, like, all of you having these conversations with people that you encounter, and those of us in leadership,
Yes.
learning how to use it a little better.
Yes.
But and I think, one of the reasons I think Liv is pretty skilled at that. If you read her goodbye article, in, what do you guys call it? Whatever your faith.
Faith and values.
Yeah.
The distribution of that is like this big.
Right.
And we have, you know,
Right.
other media vehicles, and there's none of our voices are in them.
Yep,
So, yeah.
yep.
Okay.
So we got to work on that.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I totally agree, and we're not alone. And yeah, it is going to be different.
I mean, we don't have one message, that, you know, we're talking to people that.
Well,
that's what you
nuance is
talked about.
hard, so
Yeah,
that's-
It is hard.
What I was gonna say is just that, like,
Yeah.
our culture and our beliefs and all of that is about figuring things out together and not having a perfect answer of right and wrong. It's all, we're gonna sit with you, we're gonna work through this together, we're gonna love each other through this, and God's gonna love us, and He's gonna help us figure this out. Not, here's the answer.
Right.
And right now, we're living in a world full of fear, and people want an answer. And I think that's why. We're willing to sit here and cry with you and struggle through and figure this out with you. And they're like, we have the answer, come it's over here. And so people are gonna flock to that. They're gonna realize that the answer's not really there. But I think that's one of the reasons why it's hard for us. And we pass on our faith and the story through relationship,
Yes.
not through standing up on a soapbox.
Yeah.
And so I think that is part of this, you know, so.
Yeah, thank you. I do think, yeah, so I think she answered a lot of
Sorry.
your questions.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's good, that's great, I think it's good, because you're all thinking about those things, and I think we are just gonna get smaller. I mean, I just think we're gonna be smaller, but we're gonna be clear about who we are, and then, the other thing is, like, if we really believe that the Holy Spirit is involved in this, we gotta trust that the Spirit is gonna, I mean, that's hard. I'm not saying that that's the easy thing to do, like, I pray about that every day, but, there's a reason that I'm the bishop and I didn't go and work for a nonprofit. I still believe that the gospel is transformative, and, like, I believe in the power of the Holy Spirit most of the time.
Well, when the internet first came along in email, I said, oh my gosh, this is such a Holy Spirit thing. Because now we can be talking to people all over the world and we can be sharing good stories. I mean, it was like, I was so hopeful about our hyper-connectivity that we would share the good news of solving problems more. And of course, there's a dark side to every bright side, but.
Well, and I don't think,
So I hear.
and don't think that it's just here or we're the only ones struggling. I mean, I find comfort, like, one of the books that I just finished was this new biography of Angela Merkel and her whole story, and, like, that was really powerful. Like, here's a leader who is so inspiring. I mean, she just, and a Lutheran, a daughter of a Lutheran pastor, and she grew up in Eastern Germany, and she was not gonna let her country forget their history, and then when the immigrants, I mean, it's amazing. She wasn't perfect either. I mean, the book is I thought it was balanced, and says, you know, like, these are the mistakes that she made, and there's, sometimes her scientific mind didn't help with all that, you know, empathy that people wanted her, but anyway, like, and that's in Germany, so, like, we're part of this global, and that's so complicated, and, nuance, which doesn't make a good soundbite. Yeah.
I think we have to be careful about talking about the right and the left and all of that.
Yes.
Okay, and you know, in the vitriol of our last presidential election and all the stuff that we went through, you know, people were getting extremely hateful to the extent that we're questioning each other's beliefs, right? It is not for us to judge other people's faith. We may not agree with some of what they do and their actions and things like that, but I think we would be better to, as you say, try to commune and talk to people, which is really hard to do. I mean, I confront it every single day. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten wiser and try to listen and understand where they're coming from, and trying to have people listen to me and understand where I'm coming from. I think that is really, really important. And it's not that I don't agree with these, but, you know, I talk to my children. I brought this up before, like, what's happened to our children? Why aren't they coming to our church? You know, my children are not coming. I brought them up here. I did my, you know, I baptized them, you know, all of that. And, like, I don't know why that's happened. And one of my children has started going to one of these, you know, mega churches. And instead of being critical, I'm saying, you know what, I'm just happy you're going to a church. I think she goes there because some people her age are going, and she finds that right. But I'm trying to support my children. I'd rather have them be in a Christian faith than say they have to be here and have dialogue about it, right?
Absolutely.
But, you know, it's taken me a long time to learn that.
Well, and I appreciate you lifting up, like, the far left is just as bad. So let's just name that. Like, vitriol, hate, like, no curiosity. I mean, right, and everywhere I go, there are people who are really, they want to do this. I think one of the coolest nonprofits in the Pacific Northwest is Mark Yaconelli's The Hearth in Ashland, Oregon, and it's all about, like, community storytelling, and, like, you sit down and you can't, you know how we always, when we hear somebody's story, we want, like, I mean, I do this all the time, like, I'm responding in my own head, oh, we have this connection, nope, none of that, only listen, and then you just say, thank you, you know, and then you get to share your story, and, like, to practice that, so that's great with your kid, of course, and I think the other thing is, it's, unless you're being passive aggressive, which I learned a lot about that, I can tell you. But, like, it's hard to offend people when you're genuinely curious. I just think that's a helpful, so like with your kids, I mean, you can be curious about, yeah, what would you find interesting today or life-giving when you went to worship, you know, I mean, yeah, you're just building that relationship. Because again, we aren't a political party, we're a church.
I've made friends outside of the congregation who are, who go to evangelical churches, and we talk about our faith as we hike, and the things that she has learned about curiosity and inclusion and, you know, finding a middle way has been really rewarding.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and I would say, like, I mean, I don't agree with, it's, again, being in Nampa, Idaho, near Boise, with the Nazarenes, like, I don't agree with, and I won't become a Nazarene, but boy, they really do know how to talk about their faith.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, different things we can learn from other, you know, denominations and people, and,
I have a question, kind of a different topic, but I was just thinking about, as the ELCA and youth ministry, kids are very connected around the synod. There's lots of activity for them to be connected. I mean, when I was growing up, there was or whatever. There's even a national gathering. There's camps that they go to. They see that there's other Lutherans outside of their congregation.
Yep.
And even in communities, some churches get together and do that. As adults, as I've grown up, we don't see that much. We don't see outside of our congregation as much, or don't feel as connected. The only time I feel like there's really a connection is at Synod Assembly, which is business matters, you know, and not everybody gets to go to that. And so how can we, as individuals and congregations and stuff, I mean, as a congregation, we like donate, we hear about the Synod and all that's going on, but really, how do we get involved in that? How do we feel connected? As adults, do we do that?
Yeah, great. Well, okay, so this is, again, like, I think there's different ways of being clusters, first of all. And I was saying to some of my friends that I was on a Zoom call with last night, I keep forgetting that not everybody operates the way the Treasure Valley cluster did. Because we were so kind of the minority down there, there's 11 congregations from Ontario to Mountain Home, where the Air Force Base is. Half of our congregations did confirmation together for the last 8 years. So then the adults were involved. We did a church council leadership retreat for like 4 years together. So we would do a day together, and we would each take workshops, and then we'd like have lunch, and they'd be, you know, all the treasurers have lunch together. It's different. The interesting thing about all of that is when I was finishing up, like really in between, well, it happened at Synod Assembly. 3 of the council presidents happened to be eating breakfast together, and they were like, man, a bunch of us have been through the transition call process. A bunch more are starting it. Maybe we should get together. Meggan, could you help us? And I was like, yeah, I have all your emails. So now all of the council presidents are like meeting. Well, that just kind of happens. So there are some models out there for doing more, and the clusters not just being about roster leaders. Like, let's see. How else? I mean, I think using our outdoor ministry sites in more robust ways for cluster retreats, you know, gathering. I saw that King of Glory in Boise, women were going up to St. Gertrude's, the monastery in Cottonwood, and they were inviting other women from around the cluster, you know, let's join and all go together. So I think we are really blessed. You know, there are synods that don't have any outdoor ministry sites, and we have 3. So that's quite a treasure, places to meet. And then there's some things happening right now, but I mean, just talk to me. Like, this is my cup of tea. It's like, oh my gosh, I've got somebody excited. Who do you want to partner with? Who can I get you on a Zoom call with? Because now with the technology, it's so fun. And I just led this 6-week series on Martin Luther's Freedom of a Christian. And we had 20 to 30 people from Leavenworth, to Pocatello on every week. Lori was on beginning. I mean, it was really fun. Like, and people, they liked learning about Luther, but what they really liked was, I'm finally meeting people from across the synod. And it's not the same as being in person, but it's pretty great when you're this big of a synod.
It's still that connection that we are in this, that's not just our little church
Right.
doing this thing here.
Because I know they went off on tangents, and I gave them permission to do that in breakout rooms. Like, I don't care, you know, I want, because I said, like, this is about the content, but it's also about, I mean, everything for me is about relationship building. So, there's going to be more of that.
Thank you, Megan.
Yeah.
For being present with us and sharing about the Synod.
Okay, well, thank you for being part of it, and like, I don't have all the answers. I grew up in a family where we asked really good questions, so thank you for being engaged and like showing up today. That's great. And you are a really important part of the synod, and yeah, thanks for what you do.